You are listening to a Raptors podcast, the place every week for all things Raptors. Get ready and never underestimate the heart of a champion. Hello and welcome to a Raptors podcast. I'm your host as always, Lucky Roberts, and I'm here talking to you after the Raptors fall to the Utah Jazz, 145-113. And it's been a long week, I know, for me at least, especially because the Golden State game started at 8:30, Clippers and Lakers started at 10:30, and this Utah Jazz game was also at 8:30. So it's been a long week, lots of long nights, but I'm here, ready, excited, energized to talk to you guys, not only about this Jazz game and Raptors game, which didn't really turn out to be such a enjoyable one, but also the Clippers and Lakers game, which I'm sure you are more excited for. Anyway, let's get right into it. I'm going to start off talking about the game that I'm sure made every Raptors fan's heart crumble and turn over in their graves as the Raptors lost 132-131 to the Lakers, who got a lot of help from the referees. And it's Taylor, the referee, who always does wrong by the Raptors. Fred VanVleet is famously known for going off on Ben Taylor after a game last season, and to be honest with you, he was right. And to be honest with you, the coach, Darko Rajakovic, was right to go against the referee, Ben Taylor, and what he said about Ben Taylor in that interview. He was completely and utterly within his own right to say those things, and I know it was a little harsh, and there was some dancing around expletives and some debatable expletives that were used in his burst, but at the end of the day, I think more of that is needed, because I don't know what we're protecting. I mean, yeah, referees are going to have bad days, and that's something that they tell us to understand, but why can't we call out referees on bad days? And there's going to be, we can call out players on bad days, and we can call out coaches on bad days, but for some reason we can't call out referees. I don't understand. It doesn't really make sense to me. It's not really fair on both sides, and I completely understand. I've reffed basketball. I know that it's not the easiest thing to do, and I know sometimes it can get out of hand and freak out, but I own up to my mistakes, and I think that's something that Ben Taylor and the league really need to do, because they show these reports after the games, and you'll read them, and they're like, yep, every single call was right, and obviously that's not the case. If you saw the game, it's not that in every single call. I do think they think every single call was right, but when you look at it as a whole, it doesn't seem feasible that every single one of those calls would go against the Raptors if there wasn't some third sort of a theory behind it. And there was a lot of calls that didn't get called for the Raptors, and they're not going to really talk about those ones. And so, you have to think about the whole picture. And because if you look at it case by case, yes, I feel like I can deem each of those plays as a foul. But also, that those plays get called both ways. I see it every single game, and to see it get called one way is where you raise an eyebrow, because the stats were the stats, and obviously you're gonna a stat that Darko pointed out was 22 free throws to 2 in the fourth quarter, and that has been sort of pushed back against, where it's like, well, 13 of them were actual shooting free throws, the other were intentional fouls, and so that is something that I do agree with, but still 13-2 is a big difference, and I don't think the 13 is where the issue is. I think the issue is within the 2, because as Darko said, every single time down the floor, Scotty Barnes is putting his pressure on the defense, and he's getting contact, and he's going up strong, and he's trying to finish through it. But there's contact there, and you look at some other plays by some of these Lakers players. You look at plays like Anthony Davis under the basket. He's getting fouled. You think that wouldn't be called against Scotty Barnes. And you look, Austin Reeves get bumped a little bit. Scotty Barnes get bumped, no call. And it's not just Scotty Barnes, and it's not just AD, and it's not just Austin Reeves, but it's an entire thing, and that's why you see the whole team stats used, because it's a whole team issue. Scotty Barnes at the end of this game really turned it on, and I think to stand up for your player like that, Darko was fully within his own right to do so. It's just disappointing to see that ending to a game, because the Raptors deserve to win, and you see that everywhere on Twitter. I'm sure I'm on the Raptors side of Twitter, so I'm gonna be seeing it more. But you see Lakers fans come out and saying, "Yeah, the Raptors outplayed us," and it was some crazy threes hit by Dennis Schroeder, a crazy three hit by Siakam. I'm sure that the game wouldn't be as close if those didn't go in, but the fact that they were going in just proves just how much the Raptors deserve to win this basketball game. And they got one stolen from them, and that happens. It does. Scotty Barnes led the team, 26 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds. Did foul out, but that was mainly due to having to, he's a long guy. He's put on the primary ball handler, the shooter. So he's going to foul out if you're intentionally fouling, and he did. And one of the more egregious fouls out was of Emmanuel Quickley, where it was early in the fourth quarter, midway through the fourth, and he picks up this foul. And you're like, oh, okay, man, he's sort of like bumped into him. You're really going to call that? Like his hand, he barely pushed him in the back, right? It's a play you see happen all the time. And sure, he did shove him, but I've seen it let go plenty of time, and you're saying, okay, fine. And then he goes straight back down the court. A nice move, fully within his shot, his release, and he accidentally hits a Lakers player in the jaw. And I'm not going to say it wasn't a foul, because it was. But the way I heard them describe the reasoning for it to be a flagrant seemed sort of out of whack for me. Ben Taylor says he was moving his arms in his release with speed, and that's why it was a flagrant. And to me, with speed sounds like what every single NBA player does, because why wouldn't you be doing something with speed, right? Like, if you agree that he didn't mean to do it, and if you agree that he was in his shot, why would the speed of it have anything to do with it? It just really irks me. And Emmanuel Quickley was having a great game, 21 points early in the fourth, only plays 26 minutes of total because of it. Really great game. Doesn't get to finish it out. And I think the Raptors win if that doesn't happen. I think the Raptors win if there's no flagrant called on that, because it's a 1-point game, and the Raptors were hitting everything in this one. The Raptors, Podol's obviously out for a little bit with an injury, and so Thad Young gets to start in the center position, and that was another thing that irked me. He had 10 points in this one. I'm not going to say he was bad. 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, a block, plus 7. He wasn't entirely horrible. But when you're throwing Thaddeus Young up against Anthony Davis, he's going to have 41 points like he did. He's going to have 10 rebounds and 6 assists. And you look down the bench and you say, okay, well, I feel like Chris Boucher would have done a better job. I think Chris Boucher is long enough to actually make a defensive impact on him. And I think Jonte Porter, he only played 10 minutes in this one. I think he was deserving. He's had a nice little run there, and he didn't have a good game, but he's had a nice little run where I toss him a bone, especially when you're missing your starting center. Put your backup center in who you just picked up, not the 35-year-old, original mold of this pass first wing, Thaddeus Young. Don't throw him at center. Definitely don't throw him at center. This non-athletic guy, sure, he's like wing size. He's like 6'7". You're not gonna guard AD with that. And it didn't work out that way. Siakam had a good game as well. Obviously, he was hitting his threes. 3 for 5, 25 points, 3 assists, 4 rebounds. Impressive showing. But, that's just, every single day, Pascal Siakam. That you're going to get that every day. RJ, 10 for 13. He had a really good game. Really, he's a really solid man. He brings it with the same sort of energy and strength that Scotty does in the paint. They're very, they mirror each other very much. And the player who does the exact opposite, like I was saying, who was really impressive, but when he's driving, he's less physical, more I'm just gonna sneak by you. Let me just sneak by you for a second, and it works. And he's a really quick first step. He's gonna dish it out when he can. He had 5 assists in this one, and he's gonna sneak some points in there. And he's also a great shooter, 4 for 6 from 3, was raining it in. And when the Raptors put out an effort like that, it's a game you really want to have, especially coming off a nice week last week and win against Golden State. And you're thinking, okay, the ball's rolling here, and the Raptors can really get something going. And instead, it's a loss. And then the Raptors play the Clippers, and it's a loss. And then the Raptors play the Jazz, and it's a loss as well. And I think I'm going to move on to that Jazz game right now. This game against the Jazz was essentially a stinker from the beginning. Sure, it was a competitive first quarter, but you see it slip right away in the second quarter, 36-22 in favor of the Jazz, and you never see it really come back. Sure, the Raptors, once again, competitive in the third, fourth, get blown out again. And they just really couldn't hold on. And once again, Thaddeus Young starting at center. And there wasn't really a strong enough support system like there was in the Lakers game to handle Thad Young playing center, because the Jazz put up 145. And I can't say that wasn't because we have absolutely no rim protection. And, I'm sure people are going to be saying to me, well, Lucky, this whole season you've been poo-pooing all over. Sorry, that's I find that really funny. Jakob Poeltl, and you're not wrong, and I'm not saying that he doesn't provide something in his rim protection and his screening. I just don't think he's the perfect fit for the current system that the Raptors are employing. And I think he has had his struggles in this season compared to others, where he hasn't really gelled with any of the new players since Fred VanVleet left. That, however, does not mean that we can just play without rim protection, and that's what we've sort of done. And Scotty Barnes, 3 blocks in this one. He's going to provide some rim protection, but he's sort of a tertiary rim protector, as he used to be a tertiary scorer and ball handler. Now he's sort of a primary scorer, still tertiary in ball handling, but he can't be your main dude. And I talk about roles all the time within these players, and he can't be the main dude on defense in the center position for your rim protection, because at the end of the day, guys like Walker Kessler's going to walk all over you. And he was 5 for 5 today, 12 points, 6 rebounds. Kelly Olynyk, 10 rebounds. Lauri Markkanen, 9 rebounds. John Collins, 7 rebounds. Anybody with height is going to dominate the glass against the Raptors. And, I'm going to be talking about the Clippers later, and I know I'm jumping around, but Clippers don't really have as much height as the Jazz or as the Lakers, and they still dominate us on the glass. And that's really something that is gonna it's gonna be tough to win basketball games without a center. Raptors have 31 rebounds in this one. The Utah Jazz have 56. And that basically tells you all you need to know. And it was a good game by Siakam once again. 5 for 6 from 3. It was a good game from Scotty Barnes. Not as great as it usually is. He had a bunch of missed free throws. He was 5 for 11. But at least he's getting those calls now. And I think it's something the referees sort of have relented since that Lakers game, is, okay, we're going to give Scotty his free throws, his due, because, at the end of the day, he is a star player. And obviously, it's only 2 games, and who knows, really, but it's going to add a bunch of scoring and a bunch of more pressure on the defense with Scotty Barnes there. But he had 19 points, could have had way more. Emmanuel quickly, once again, really good game, 15 points, 3 for 3 from 3, 4 for 8 in total, but a good performance from him there. He's really blossomed in this starting role, and you look at all those other Kentucky guards and you think, man, he might be as good as all them. You look at Maxey, I think he could be just as good as Maxey. You look at Jamal Murray, I think he can be just as good as Jamal Murray. And it's going to take some time, but already you can start to see it click for him. And RJ Barrett, he's going to have on and off games. He was on against the Lakers, so he's going to be off against the Jazz. And he was on against the Clippers, he's going to be off against the Jazz. That's just sort of the type of player he is, and we just need to continue to see that consistency from him. But yeah, then the final starter, He had 4 points. R.J. Barrett 7 rebounds, so at least he was contributing. He actually led the team in rebounds today. Jonte Porter following behind him. Well, I don't know why he's not starting. Anyway, Thad Young had 2 at the starting center position, but it's not going to happen every day. And our 5th starter, Thad Young, gave us a whole donut. So nothing to see there. Schroeder, once again, really good off the bench. I really love what he's doing there. 4 for 7 from 3. That's the only shots he hit today. 4 assists. Exactly what you want to see, and that's sort of his role and what it's going to be. And I already covered Jonte Porter. Hit a 1 for 3 from 1 for 4. Sorry, from 3. 3 for 8. He was sure minus 23, but he had a solid game for a young guy. And a better game than at least Thad Young had, who only played 12 minutes in this one. Jalen McDaniels, 15 points. He had a bunch of free throws in this one, 7 for 10. You would like to see a couple more drop in, but you'll take it. 15 points off the bench, a lot more production than we've seen from Jalen McDaniels. We let the Jazz just have one today. And we just never really were going to get it. And they were down in the standings, and they've sort of rushed back as the Raptors have. But it's unfortunate to see. I'm moving on to the Clippers game, where the Raptors lost 126-120. Another tough performance from Thad Young, but not as bad as the one that we just watched was. He had 8 points in this one. A couple steals, rebounds, 4 for 5 field goal, but he still is lacking in defensive ability. And the LA Clippers, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard went off. James Harden, 11 assists. He had a pretty good game, but it was Kawhi and Paul George's game. And the Clippers have really been on a tear after they've sort of figured it out with James Harden, with Russell Westbrook, with Kawhi and Paul George, and they've really found themselves a nice core and a nice way to just start tearing down these teams. You got Terrence Mann, Zubac, 11 rebounds. What you gonna do when you got no rebounders? But Scotty Barnes, a poor performance in this one, only 12 points. But he was throwing in some assists and rebounds. Jonte Porter, 9 points, 7 rebounds. Really good. Give him more minutes. Why don't you think? Emmanuel Quickley, R.J. Barrett, I was just talking about how they've had some really good games. And Emmanuel Quickley, the more consistent player, has continued that. R.J. Barrett, though, really good in this Clippers game. And Dennis Schroeder was actually given the start as Pascal Siakam didn't want to play in the back-to-back because I think we're retaining his trade value, which is a smart idea. And a lot of people were saying he's going to get traded today, but it has yet to happen. Siakam, back spasms was the ruling there. We saw Gary Trent Jr. have a decent game, but he's a shell of his former self for sure. And it was just their scorers outscored our scorers. And I think if Siakam's there, it's a different story. I think we can win this game, but if you keep losing these games where you're like, oh, if this thing happened, you're just a losing team, Every team has excuses. Figure your stuff out. You're gonna have bad games like the Jazz, and you're not gonna be able to rebound, and that's gonna happen more when you don't have Podol. But figure your stuff out. All right. Pascal Siakam was needed in this one, and I think it might be a sign of the times where Siakam might not be here much longer. But all in all, I think it was a valiant effort. Especially without your best player in Pascal Siakam. And the Clippers are a good team. And so to put that type of performance together is nothing to scoff at. And I think that was this whole week, really. Starting out with this wonderful win against the Golden State Warriors. It was a 133-118, the final score. And it was right after the nice week I was saying we had last week. And the Raptors really just outscored the Warriors, and it was before the Podol issue was something that was there. Klay Thompson had 25. Curry only 9, a really, really good job by the Raptors there, keeping him in check. But this game was R.J. Barrett's, and R.J. Barrett's alone. He had, 20, it seemed like, in the first quarter. In the second, he continued. He had 37 for the entire game. He was plus 26. He was hitting threes, 5 for 8 from 3. It was the R.J. Barrett we want to see and we love to see. And he must have caught on to something in the air in San Francisco, because he was draining in the threes. He was very, very consistent, hitting his shots, and hit his free throws 6 for 8. Decent enough. 37 points, really great showing, really something you want to see more of from RJ, because it can happen. And it was really good from him. And also, I would argue the second best player in this game. It's a toss-up between him and Siakam, but for a player doing this in only 16 minutes, I think Boucher was the second best player in this one. 9 rebounds, assists, a steal, a block. And as he gets older, sort of, you see him, his athleticism, his energy is sort of fallen by the wayside. But he had a really good game in this one. And you love to see it for Chris. He's sort of now, once we deal Siakam, the Mr. Raptor. He's the one who stayed by the longest, which is something is surprising to see, especially because a couple seasons ago, he was almost, Nick Nurse almost traded him. He was almost cut. He was done for. He wasn't getting any minutes, and he carved himself back a role. And sure, his role's diminishing now, but it's still, he's still a needed bench piece, and he showed it today. 17 points, 3 for 3 from 3, and 9 rebounds. Just really good all performance. 16 minutes, exactly what you want to see. Quickly, not so much as a good game. He had 9 points, 4 for 10, but he still threw in 10 assists. And that's where he makes an impact where RJ doesn't. And we don't get a good game from Quickly. We don't get a good game from Barnes. But we still find a way to win against the Warriors, who are in the mud, you could say. Klay Thompson, like I said, had a really good game. But you look down their roster, I'm not a huge fan of Saric. They have Jackson, Davis. They're just playing guys where it's like, man, look how far you've fallen, really. You see these guys coming off the bench. You see these guys starting, and you're like, what has happened to you guys? Wiggins, minus 29. Why would we want him? I really don't want him in a trade. Sure, he's Canadian. That's the only thing he's got going for him. Sure, he was an all-star. He didn't deserve to be an all-star, let alone a starter. I do not want Andrew Wiggins on this team with his huge salary. And if we are taking him on, we better be getting more stuff in return, because he's not a plus player this season. He just really isn't. He had 3 points in this one. Really held the Warriors back. Moody had 21. I'd like to see him there. But you see these guys coming off the bench, Podziemski, and you're like, sure, he's cool. They're cool dudes, but you've fallen so far from your golden years, and they are still clinging on to them. But I think it's over. Podol, he had a good game for this one, 14 and 11, and those 11 rebounds is something that we've been missing the last 3 games since then. Siakam, 16. I would say he was the third best player in this one, with 6 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks. A poor game for Siakam standards, but still pretty good game. And the Raptors were able to, hold on and win against the Warriors, which is a team you got to beat if you're going to be good. And I don't think we're going to be good, but if you want to be good, you got to beat the Warriors. And I do want to be good, but I don't think we're going to be good. And it was, Gary Trent also 14 points, still not as great as he was, but him and Schroeder, really good guard backup coming off the bench. And, that's going to do it for the Raptors section of this podcast. Going to quickly go over the rest of the NBA standings, and then I'm going to have you guys on your way. So I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be back, and I'll talk about that. But before I do so, and just something that I sort of forgot to do, but the upcoming schedule for the next week is Boston, Miami, Chicago, New York. The first 3 are at home, and then we're going to New York. The TNT game that the Raptors... only one that they get is against Chicago on Thursday, and it's a game where I think the Raptors can win. Boston, Miami, maybe not so much. New York, not so much. Especially in Madison Square Garden. But at the end of the day, I think it's definitely a 1-4 week. I mean, a 1-3 week. 2-2 possibly if we continue playing, and the way we have been without Podol, probably 1-3. But that's how it's going to go, and I think we might see some more players on the move since then. But let's talk about the NBA. All right, in the Eastern Conference, once again sitting atop alone all by themselves is the Boston Celtics. Still 18-0 at home. Sure, they've lost one, but it was away most recently. 7-3 in their last 10, followed up by the Bucks, 76ers, Pacers, and Cavs and Knicks, rounding out that playoff mix. 9-1 are the Indiana Pacers. Really picked themselves up. They had a great start, obviously play-in tournament finalists. Then they dropped off a little bit as the season went on, just as the Lakers did. And they found themselves once again and have been on a tear of recent and find themselves once again in the top 4 in the Eastern Conference with, Tyrese Halliburton looking every single part of the superstar that he is. And it's just really good to see them back on the winning streak. You see Knicks, they've also been on a bit of a tear, but they winning 5 in a row since OG Anunoby joined their team. A loss, however, most recently, that streak has ended, but they still do look like a different team, gelling way better together on the defensive end and offensive end. Not so much, but it's not really what they needed, and OG brings a lot to them, and it's good to see them and see OG thrive, especially. Miami Heat, Magic, Bulls, Nets are the next ones up. Bulls and Nets really look right for the taking if you're a Hawks or Raptors fan who are just outside of the play-in spot. But do you really envy them? I don't really envy them. So I'm not really too hyper to get into their spots. But I don't think they are either. It's going to be really interesting to see who tries to even try to get into the playoffs in this poor and bottom end of this Eastern Conference. Obviously, the Hornets, Wizards, and Pistons aren't real basketball teams. They're just records at this point. Nobody's really going to watch them. But Raptors and Hawks, I guess, are in the respectable position, and they need to continue to drop further down the rankings. In the Western Conference, the Minnesota Timberwolves, only 5-5 in their last 10, sort of slowed down, cooled off a little bit, still at the top of the Western Conference. And you see the Nuggets and Thunder sort of creeping back into contention for that one spot. Clippers as well, 8-2 in their last 10. The Clippers, as they've beat the Raptors most of recently, and have really gelled together, as I've mentioned earlier. The Kings and Mavericks also there. Pelicans, Suns still trying to figure out what's going on with them. Jazz 8-2 in their last 10. They were in a spot where the Raptors were, and they've pushed up further into those spots. And then the Lakers and Warriors, better than those teams even in the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference, still looking on the outside, looking in, and I think they should be looking not into the play-in tournament, but more at their team and in their own organization to say, what do we really want? Because this is nothing to be chasing. Grizzlies, Blazers, Spurs, not real basketball teams. Grizzlies trying as hard as they can, but a John Morant injury is going to put them out of their misery this season. And yeah, that's basically going to do it for the podcast. A little shorter of this NBA recap landscape, but it was an extra long Raptors segment, so I just wanted to end it out. It is, 1 a.m. in the morning. So thanks for listening as always, and, have a great day. Follow me on Twitter, do whatever you want to do, and as always, enjoy it.